All right, we are live, and we are live across all platforms. Looks like LinkedIn is having a problem, so we're live on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. And I'm Neil Smith. For those that I might not know, I'm 40 years old. I'm a white man. I live in New York City. I've got two kids, and this is my friend Jason. Jason, I would love for you to share those that don't know you, who you are, where you live, just a little background on who you are, and then I want to get into your upbringing, but maybe a little bit on just context of who you.
Yeah. So Jason Caston, 42 years old, born and raised right outside Chicago, and currently living in Dallas. Me and you've been friends for, I don't know, I'd say about 12 years, some long time.
Yeah.
And just father of two daughters. And so kind of interestingly navigating how these new times are going. So, it's looking forward to having a conversation about how things are going and just, quite a few different levels of life currently at the moment.
Yeah. Well, Jason and I had it was maybe 4 years ago, that we went and had some chicken in Dallas, and this was when kind of the beginning of the Black Lives Matter movement, and I didn't understand it, and I just, because we're friends, I was able to ask you out of my ignorance, and the education you gave me over that meal has shaken me since, and that's a lot why I want to have this conversation, because I think if more people could have that level of honest conversation and understanding, I couldn't see Colin Kaepernick different, or it shifted the whole understanding of every protest that I see, even writing that I see. There's an empathy. And I would say it was only the beginning of my understanding, and I'm still at a point of continuing to understand. I cannot fully understand, but I can do my best to gain a level of empathy and understanding. Jason, if you would start though by sharing, growing up in Chicago, what was your upbringing like, and even I'm curious even when you began to understand racism and experience racism, and what were some of those experiences like growing up?
Oh, okay. Well, let me step back to the first thing you mentioned about me and you just going to have chicken at Babe's lovely restaurant down here. It's interesting enough to see that since a lot of the events have occurred over the last week or so, I've had a lot of church communicator friends, we'll call them. My white friends have reached out and have been and asked questions and certain things that they were not able to see. There's where their blind spots were and how they could help and other things. I have Black friends that have posted on Facebook and said, hey, whether it was white people are checking on them, who've never checked on them before, coworkers, what have you, they don't want to hear it. Totally understandable response.
Yeah.
The frustration that a lot of us feel is warranted. It has been going on for years, and it was gonna boil over.
Yeah.
So they would just say, hey, go check Google, research for yourself. That's a totally fine response. My response, because of how me and you approached other things in our career as educating people and trying to help them understand things, I said, okay, I'm going to help you all understand. I want you all to see some of these blind spots. So when me and you had the conversation, it was me talking to a friend saying, hey, let me help you understand a lot of things that you don't see. Let me help educate you. So just, for white allies that are out here, some people that you want to ask, or Black friends that you have and want to ask, some are tired and frustrated at the moment. Give them their moment to have that. But there are people that you can ask. So don't think that your voice is silenced. We do need allies. We do need your voice. And I've been, speaking with quite a few of my white friends about that and things they can do. Now, let's step back and bring up in Chicago. So in Chicago, I was raised right outside of Chicago, south suburbs called Hazel Crest, probably about 20 minutes from Chicago. I was raised in a neighborhood that was probably 98% Black. I really didn't get into any type of environments where I saw a lot of white people until I went to the University of Illinois in college.
Mm.
So for all that, my upbringing, it was just, it was just all I saw was Black people.
Mm.
And however, it was typical, I would say, middle class to lower middle class. We didn't know, as far as the economic status or social status or any of that stuff. I didn't really understand any of that stuff. We all were the same.
Yeah.
However, the one thing I think, and I didn't even tell you this, when we talked, I had to sit and think about it because someone asked me, like, when was the first time I experienced racism?
Mm-hmm.
And it was, I think I was 9 years old, I want to say. And I was at a baseball game. And the coach I had was a white guy, and his son was on the team, and everything was great. It was a typical baseball experience, except for on this one day, we're all playing. And at a typical youth baseball game, the parents are yelling for their kids, they're yelling at the coach, then all the rest of the stuff, here, put my kid in, all the rest of the stuff. So I don't know what they said to the coach, because we were all out on the field. All of us are friends, Black, white, enjoying it. And he told the lady, go back to the ghetto where you came from. And that was one of our teammates' mother, black woman. And all I know is at the end of that inning, my mother and about 10 other mothers like snatched us all off the field. Like that was done. We were taken out the game. Yeah. We didn't know what was going on. We're kids. Yeah. So, but when she was explaining to me what was happening on the way home, I kind of I didn't process it all, but I started to realize that what he said was wrong. And so after that, he was no longer our coach. He actually came and talked to us and apologized later on at a practice when the new coach came. But I mean, we didn't really know. We didn't really understand that. But I didn't really process it until much later in life that what had actually happened, what he had actually said, and how that impacted us. But I had never had anything happen like that. And so to see something like that at the age of 9, I want to say, was just it's something that I wouldn't want my kids to ever have to deal with. And I hadn't even thought about it with me. And you talked 4 years ago. I didn't really actually remember it till like 2 days ago.
Yeah. Wow. So I'm curious, did you have a perception of white people growing up, knowing that maybe only 2% of people you were around were white?
I didn't have a perception as far as whether I thought they were good or bad. I just knew there were a few of them that went to the schools that I would attend. Elementary school, growing up, there were more. And as I got further along in school, in high school, there were less and less. The ones that I knew, I was really good friends with. I'm still good friends with them to this day. But there wasn't any perception as far as anything that I thought about them. Now, as I got older, I did start to have conversations with my mom's boyfriend, or sometimes if I'm talking to my dad, that about certain systemic things that they would explain to me about certain things you need to watch out. And the conversation about the police, my mom sat me down, and the guy she was dating at the time sat me down and we had that conversation. And then we were very aware of the police at our high school because we had incidents. So, but to me, that was just normal high school experience. So as far as seeing the cops every day, or seeing the cops, arresting someone or roughing someone up or anything like that, a lot of things that I see today that are being filmed wasn't anything different than what I saw before. It's just they're being filmed now.
Yeah. And it was just basically when you had that conversation, it was just like, and that's been normal. It was just the natural conversation that a dad has with his son. And you just kind of put that in your, the back of your head. And if you were arrested or if you saw cops, you just were pulled back a little bit, or how did you even process it then? It's a conversation my dad never had with me. I can't even think about how I would process that.
Yeah, so the guy who raised me, Will, the guy who, when he sat me down and talked to me about some of these things, as well as my mom, the way they talked to me about the police, it was, you were taught basically to fear the police.
Yeah.
So there weren't the neighborhood police or your friends or anything like that. You don't talk to police. You fear police. You answer yes sir, no sir. You always keep your hands in sight. And it wasn't along the lines of us thinking like you won't make it home. No, we didn't think about that. The stuff
Yeah.
that we kind of think about today. We just thought about it of if you acted a fool, they was going to get you,
Yeah.
and that was just a beating. I mean, it wasn't so much so as you were going to get shot. That never crossed our mind.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
we were definitely, when you're driving and the cops get behind you, instinctually you try and move away from that situation. Like, you don't want the cops behind you ever. We're taught that that never ends well.
Yeah.
So, and there's our situations where um, you see stuff that you're doing, and even if me and you are riding and the cops get behind me, yeah, my mannerisms will change.
Yeah.
So no matter where I'm at. And so that's just how my bringing was. I don't want the cops behind me. I don't want to be in a situation where the cops pull me over, and that's how it's been since I got my license at 16.
Wow. Wow. One of the things that I've processed, and we're going to get into white privilege a little bit later in the conversation, but
Yeah.
I was thinking about my upbringing when I remember in sixth grade, I got caught. I don't know, even know if my parents know this, but I got caught shoplifting in a grocery store, and I basically just said, they came to me and just said, "Hey, give it back," and let me go. I have a feeling if I was black, it would have been a different experience. I was arrested when I was 16 for shoplifting. It seems to be a trend in my
Yeah.
life, I
Yeah.
suppose, but because I got away with it. And at the end of the day, I went to juvenile, and I went, got the mugshot and the whole deal, but I
Yeah.
also went home that day. And my dad just came and picked me up, and I think there's just some things that our upbringings we're just different. And I think obviously everything that we experience growing up shapes who we are. Can you share, Jason, then in college, you mentioned that's when you really first experienced racism directly. What
Yeah.
were some of those experiences?
Well, I can step back to high school. We're talking about shoplifting
Yeah.
experiences. So yeah, I was in a situation where I got caught in high school. And the thing that about my situation was I was working for, I won't even say the store. I was working for a store, and I hooked a friend up, under ringing, all that good stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I get pulled to the back room, and they're like, "Hey, we know we caught you, et cetera, et cetera." And I'm in a room with typical security, all this stuff. So
Yeah.
a room with about 3, 4 white guys. That's just what it was. That's life. The thing that he said, though, that caught my attention, that made me think this was a little different, as opposed to just, we're trying to get this kid is in trouble, and we're going to take him to jail, was they caught me at, let's say the store closed at 5. They pulled me in the back room at like 4:55. At
Yep.
5 o'clock, they put everybody out the store, and the guy said, "Oh man, everybody's going to be gone. We're not going to be able to do the perp walk in front of everybody." Now that to me was a tad bit different, like, because he clearly let me know the
Yep.
goal was, we want to walk you out in front of everybody and embarrass you,
Wow.
and show you that what you did, you need to feel sorry for. Other than that, the whole experience of getting arrested, going to the holding cell, all the rest of that stuff pretty was pretty normal. I didn't feel anything else. I know that my mom had to come get me out, so
Yeah.
that did occur. But yeah, that situation occurred. In terms of college, and being down in Champaign, Urbana, and that type of area, the things that we saw there were interesting, in that was the first time I was in a situation or environment where I think I'm going to say 5%, we'll say 10% tops
Mm-hmm.
of the entire population of the school enrollment was black. And
Yeah.
so the majority of the enrollment at the university was white people. And so that environment was totally different. And our interactions with the police, whether it be at night after partying, or just in random situations of being pulled over, were just different And so there you would see police, you see them being more aggressive. The actual event that I can recall, which your friend told me, is when it was graduation night and we were all out and we get into a skirmish. And we've seen skirmishes or bar fights or anything like that at the university, whether it be kids at a white bar and they're out there and we're like, man, look at these crazy kids out here fighting or what have you, and just tussling, and they just break it up and send it home. The thing that got me about my friend when our situation was eventually we're out, we get into it with some people and everybody ended up getting maced. That was the best part of the story, because one of my friends told me, he said, hey man, one of those cops pulled a gun out and he had it pointed at you. I didn't know, because we're all running around. I'm trying to make sure all my friends are safe and stuff. And so, if you see one of your friends are fighting, you go help. But my friend told me the cop had a gun out. Now, if the other cop had maced us and everybody scattered, I don't say mace, pepper spray, whatever he did, and everybody scattered, who knows what would have happened? But I didn't know. I didn't see a gun. My friend told me that the dude pulled out a gun and was pointed at. It's like, I could see why the gun was pulled out. Obviously, if you got all these people fighting and so on and so forth, I understand that aspect of it. But I had never heard of any cop pulling out a gun on anyone else in any situation. So that to me was just a different dynamic, and how terrible a story had that have been if on graduation night, some a terrible incident like that would have occurred and one of us would not have been able to walk across the stage because we got murdered. So that stuff like that kind of shaped how we view, how I viewed police moving forward. But it wasn't out of the norm. It was just like, that's just how the police are. So these things, to me now, everything we're seeing now doesn't make me feel like, oh my goodness, the police are 1,000 times worse. I'm just like, no, everybody's filming everything they're doing. Yeah. So filming is what seems to be changing things. Yeah. And when it comes to trying to explain different situations to, whether it be white friends who might have blind spots that can't see it, or different white people who just don't understand it, then you have to go through the stuff of, well, what happened before the video came on, and what are the different contexts, and because the view of interactions with the police has been so different growing up and throughout their entire lives, that to them, the police are innocent until proven guilty, and not the black person who was murdered, or the black person who was shot, or the black person who was abused. And we feel like video would help the case, but it doesn't. And then we mentioned earlier when I was explaining to you about Kaepernick, you take something like peaceful protesting and you have it have the whole entire movement hijacked to focus on the flag and disrespecting the military. And so therefore, we have to, as Black people, shout, scream, prove that we're not trying to disrespect the flag or the military or anything along those lines, and get away from the actual issue. And so here we are again. Yeah. We got to fight to prove that injustices actually occur. We got to fight and by recording it, we got to fight to prove systemic racism even exists, or even white privilege even exists, because white fragility just doesn't want to hear that. And then in everything, we just continually having to fight to prove that these things even exist. And even when we get to the point now, or certain white allies are like, okay, we get it. Now we finally get it that it exists. What can we do next? And some Black people are just frustrated, like, okay, goodness, it took us 10 years to even get you to this point.
Yeah.
So, and I'm just saying 10 years in my life. I'm sure it's elder Black people that are probably haven't seen, or heard that in their entire lifetime of 60s plus years.
Yeah. I think, and I'm going to speak as a generalization here. I think most white people still believe that it's in the past, like like you were freed and you have the right to vote and you can go to college and you can get a job. So can you help maybe even define and create a level of understanding of systemic racism, and what that's a term that we're hearing in the news a lot. But but as you know, and my upbringing was very different than yours. I went to private school in Houston, and I was primarily around white people throughout most of my upbringing, and racism wasn't a thought. And I had some black friends, but it wasn't primary, and it just wasn't. I didn't think about racism. I didn't see racism in my context, and so it's hard to understand when you don't experience it, when you don't see it. So what is systemic racism, and how has that continued through decades and continued today?
Well, initially, I mean, the way the United States was founded was based on systems in place where we can all recall, okay, black people were considered 3/5 of a person. Okay, we could just start with that. So the whole systems and things and all the way this country was founded was based on whites were superior to blacks. That's it. And Native Americans. So we haven't even gotten into that. But as these systems continue to mature and you go from slave catcher, that system turns into actual policing, then each of these systems have been built upon, and we haven't gotten into the financial systems and banking, where no, it's not blatant, where you'll go in there and say, as a black person, and say, hey, I would like a loan for a home. The banker will look at certain areas and say, oh, well, that home is redlined. We're not going to finance the home. You can't own a home. So therefore, systemically, black people can't build generational wealth because we couldn't own homes because the banking system was systemically excluding us from access to capital to do certain things. In the work system, employment. Now, if I give examples now, because back then, you'd see places that say they were hiring, and then based on as soon as they see what you look like, no, you weren't. We're not hiring. Now you could do tests, and I've seen A/B testing where you, depending on the name you have on your resume, it shows how far you could get along in the process based on whether you're a black or white. Now there are actual applications where you can choose to identify. I think they ask you to identify whether you're white, black, Latino, etc., Asian, as for on the resume or on the application. But there was systemic discrimination in place for that. Now, the main thing when we talk about systemic racism is, I mean, all those things put in place are just the American way. But the justice system, which is and the way the justice system is supposed to be fair, statistically has shown that it's not. It's just not fair when it comes to people of color getting sentences that are much harsher and much longer than white counterparts doing the same things. So we're talking about, but when it comes to white privilege and white fragility, we're saying that, hey, we're not saying that that you just go out and you're able to just commit crimes and not have any issues that come of that, or saying that your skin isn't an issue when it comes to the consequences and dealing with these systems. So in looking at that stuff when I watch something through my lens, when I see a lot of white people storm the Capitol with AR-15s, saying that they're upset and they want to open up the cities for whatever reasons and stuff like that was occurring. The thing I look at and I say, there's not a reality that I see where 50 black people can storm a Capitol with AR-15 and not 50 people get shot with AR-15s. 50 black people get shot with AR-15s. I just don't see that as a reality. And so to me, that those type of systemic injustices are just part of the problem. And again, there's so much more to go into with this, but I'll stick with those just to start. The reaction systemically of police to people of color doing things that white people can do without consequence is even a systemic issue in itself. Now that could be considered maybe a bias of policing, but that's something in itself. For example, if we look at John Crawford or Tamir Rice, Ohio is an open carry state. Each of them was shot for having play toy guns in different environments. Tamir Rice was in the park. I believe John Crawford was in a Walmart, but the cops came in and just shot him.
Yeah.
But we have videos, and those we have actual videos of police being able to talk white people down with guns, knives, weapons, what have you, using these mysterious white strategic skills to talk them down or somehow de-escalate the situation. And we know that Black people who are watching this, or other ethnicities that are watching this, are like, no, Black and brown people are not going to get that. We don't get that mysteriously magic white strategic de-escalation skill.
Yeah.
We don't get that. We don't want to see, white people murdered. We're not asking to see that. We just want to see those same mysterious, magical police de-escalation skills used on people who have a little more melanin in their skin. And that's just not the American way. But institutional racism is built into the fabric of America, so much so that they feel like when you are trying to protest racism, there are people in America who feel like you're protesting America.
Yeah.
That's how American racism is.
It's, Jason, it's a hard, and honestly, we don't talk about it a lot, that in our history that a Black person was defined as 3/5 of a person. That is one of the most disgusting things I've ever heard. That people that we celebrate is who said that. And I mean, I think how that could have been is just, it's hard to understand, but that is a reality of how our country and our country's government was formed. And I think we've got to own that. I think we've got to own that. We've got to understand that's, and one of the things that where I've gained a lot of learning is I watched 13, the documentary on Netflix. It gave me a lot of understanding around the justice system. Right. DeAndre Hopkins yesterday tweeted that he wears the number 10 because his cousin got a 10-year sentence and was in prison for 10 years for $600 worth of drugs. I think that would not have happened. It very unlikely it would have happened to a white man in the same way. I think there's no doubt there's proof around that if you just look at it. I appreciate the definition, and the clarity that you gave around that. I'm curious, have you professionally or personally experienced any of those? Have you maybe not gotten a job or had a harder time? What some of your experiences might have been around that, or even with your kids?
I think that as far as me being excluded from certain positions, I don't know if that's definite something that I can definitely say, okay, I was excluded from that because I was Black, and not because I don't know. It's because I operate at a level of logic and truth and emotion. So emotionally, sometimes I'm like, yep, I know I can feel that, but logically, I don't have the facts to back it up. But there are times where me and you had a conversation, even in this conversation, and I asked you, no, you asked me, do I notice when I walk in a room and I'm the only Black person there? Yeah. And that could be at previous jobs I've had. I've been in rooms where in executive leadership where I am the only Black person in the room. So, and I do notice in those instances how much validation my voice may have, or am I the token in the room? Yeah. So I do notice in that particular situation things along those lines. So as far as have I noticed where a position I haven't gotten or an opportunity I haven't gotten because I was Black, I've felt that way before, but I don't have any facts that usually back that up. And unfortunately, one of the things I've noticed when you're trying to prove racism in a society that is built to not even acknowledge racism and act like it's gone, it mysteriously went away. That sometimes is an exercise in futility in itself. One of the conversations I was having, and I was reading a post on Facebook about a gentleman was posting about something. He had a German friend, and they made a joke about calling him a Nazi, and he immediately shut that down because that's a part of their history that they don't
Yeah.
want to acknowledge, or not acknowledge, but they don't want to. They want to let it be known that they want to belittle that.
Yes.
They want to apologize for that. They want to make sure they make amends for that.
Yes.
And one of the things about in America with our particular view of our history, it's the bad parts, get over it. So blacks, we need you to get over slavery. It's over and done with. However, we want to, and I mean, in a certain, especially in the South, especially with you being from the South and me currently living in the South, that Confederate flag, boy, well, they love that, and them Confederate generals.
Yep.
They love that. They love it. They love the Confederate monuments. They love the Confederate generals. They love this Confederate flag that essentially was about, and they try and use the mental gymnastics to make it as if it wasn't about slavery. Like the whole Confederation was about slavery. The whole country went to war about slavery. Now, whatever mental gymnastics you want to use to try and talk around it, hey, so be it. But what it comes down to is that's what it was about. And this country refuses to acknowledge that the institutions that were put in place even afterwards, i.e. Jim Crow, i.e. COINTELPRO, and other ways that the government has, and the things that they have done to make it much harder for Black people in this country, they just act like that stuff just magically is gone now, and it's not gone now. There are people who will use MLK quotes, Dr. Martin Luther King, who will use his quotes, who know if Martin Luther King was alive today, they would not like him, just because the Gallup poll showed he had a 66% unfavorable rating at the time that he was assassinated. He was not liked. He was not liked then, and Kaepernick had a 72% unfavorable rating in 2017 when he was protesting. So it's like now afterwards, yeah, it's great to use those lovely MLK quotes of, turn the other cheek and nonviolent protests and all the rest of that stuff. But had he been around then, you wouldn't have liked him. And the numbers show that. It's not an emotional feeling. It's what data shows.
Yeah.
So it's unfortunate. So there are solutions that we talk about moving forward, and we can definitely get to that. But those are the facts of what the things that have occurred.
Yep. And I think we've got more to talk about before we can even talk about moving forward, because there's so much to this, Jason.
Yeah.
And where we started our conversation before was help me understand the Black Lives Matter movement, because the conversation then, and you don't hear as much now, but I think people, maybe not as publicly, are still saying all lives matter. Can't we say all lives matter? Help those watching this right now understand why Black Lives Matter is important, and all lives matter can be offensive in this conversation.
Yeah, so Black Lives Matter started with focusing on the impact that, and it seemed how much Black lives were not mattering with systemic injustice, with police being filmed brutalizing or killing Black men, and just other ways that Black lives were being demeaned and devalued in this particular society.
Yeah.
Okay, so then you have people coming in talking about all lives matter, and not saying that in a way that appeared to be, hey, we're going to come in with all lives matter to say Black lives matter as well. And so it was more so of, you keep saying Black lives matter, I'm offended somehow that Black lives matter is either not excluding me or somehow making me feel like I'm, and these are whoever the white people were that were talking about all lives matter. Somehow I'm offended by the all lives matter. I mean, the Black Lives Matter movement, making it feel like I'm somehow racist. So I'm going to say all lives matter. And so you had to give examples. You had to say, okay, great. You saying all lives matter is offensive to us, but you would never if we were talking at a breast cancer event, you would never say, okay, look, I know we're doing this event for breast cancer, but all cancers matter. So we need to focus on all cancers and not breast cancer. You did like the stuff that you would never do, because breast cancer doesn't offend you, doesn't make you feel like, you're, somehow disregarding all the other cancers. But with the Black Lives Matter movement, so many white people got offended by it, and either, whether it be, again, white fragility, white guilt, what have you. And so therefore the Black Lives Matter movement was never about saying anybody else's lives did not matter. We weren't even focused on that. We were focusing on the devaluation and the systemic injustice and the killing of Black people, and how it just didn't matter. If we got it on tape, it didn't matter. The police were walking free. If we showed you video, then we still had to prove that, even if we saw the video, well, what happened before and after video? Like, we just had to continue to prove that a Black life mattered. And so that was just part of the movement, as far as us trying to get out here and talk about it, and get allies to understand that this is what the movement that we're making, and to get awareness brought to it. But of course, the media tried to hijack it and make it into something that it wasn't. White people who were upset, offended, whatever, tried to make it into something that it wasn't. And therefore, all lives matter became an offensive response to Black Lives Matter. And I think, if we use it, let's just go back to just take emotion out of it, just using logic. If we never said Black Lives Matter, then nobody would have been saying all lives matter. It would have been a response, just wouldn't have been a thing. But that was the immediate, response to Black Lives Matter. And then Black Lives Matter was never about trying to devalue any other lives. We were saying Black lives were already being devalued. We believe, all lives do matter. That's great. Not what we're talking about right now. We're focusing on Black lives. And it took a while for people to even understand that. And some people just won't get it.
Yeah.
That's just how life is. Some people just won't get it and don't want to get it. Yeah. That's fine.
Yeah. So with that said, I want to flip the conversation to white privilege, because so many people don't believe that white privilege is even a thing. I heard, I don't know if you listened to the conversation. It's a fantastic conversation between Rush Limbaugh and the Breakfast Club. They did a shared conversation, and Rush Limbaugh said this is something made up by the left. It's just language. And it was, but it's not just Rush Limbaugh who believes this, and this is not a political conversation you and I are having. This is a conversation about racism, and white privilege is definitively a thing. But maybe can you help even understand, what does that mean, white privilege? Because I think as a white person with privilege, you don't even understand that you have privilege. So from your perspective, what does that mean?
So white privilege, and I love this article that was written by Seth Muse, and he actually was talking about quite a few things. It's called Dear White People, and in it he was talking about white privilege, and how one of the things I like that he mentioned was white privilege wasn't saying that you are you somehow have these advantages that over everybody else, that that even white people are like, I just don't see these advantages. I don't see these advantages. And so what we were trying to get across is white privilege is not necessarily like all of a sudden you get this white privilege stimulus package that makes your life all that better. It's just saying that the color of your skin is not going to be a hindrance into a lot of situations that other people, Black people, can walk into, where the color of their skin will be a hindrance. One of the great examples of white privilege that we saw was, I can't think of what city the protest was in, but they said white people to the front, and all the white people that were there protesting, they went to the front. So when the cops started advancing towards the crowds, they had the white people in the front, knowing that the least likely amount of conflict and violence would happen if the white people were in the front.
Wow.
That was an instance of using your white privilege as an ally.
Wow.
Because we just know that when that conflicts between white people and the cops just end differently than when conflicts between black people and the cops. That's just how it is.
Yes.
And so and another thing is, in different situations, white privilege would be an example that me and you were talking about earlier. You have a situation where you're shoplifting, and they either call your dad, tell him to come get you. Hey, what are you doing? Stop. Just go ahead. Go on about your business. I have a situation where I'm shoplifting, and the guy's like, man, I didn't get a chance to give you the perp walk. Like, I need to teach you a lesson. We're both 16-year-old kids just doing stupid teenager stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But the way I'm viewed as a 16-year-old kid, young black kid, and the way you're viewed as a 16-year-old young white kid is totally different. Does that mean that you somehow felt more privileged in your shoplifting experience? No, you didn't. You just doing something stupid like I was. But the system that we have here in America is made so that your experience is easier on you and doesn't mess up your life. And mine could possibly have been made for me to have a more difficult experience and teach me a lesson.
Yeah.
So that's what we mean. We're talking about white privilege. Does not mean that you have this, again, like I said, some type of special package, the special powers that will make your life easier. We're saying your skin color will not make your life as difficult as my skin color makes mine, walking into similar situations, things that we mentioned before, getting pulled over by the cops, job interviews, going into a bank with the redlining situation that we were talking about before, and just other stuff, other situations that that we've seen dealt. Or if we both decide, I want to get a group of me and about 50 of my friends and grab some AR-15s and go storm the Capitol, and you want to get a group of you and your friends and 50 friends and AR-15s and storm the Capitol. I got a feeling me and my friends will have a different outcome, and it'll be 50 funerals.
Yeah. Well, and I think my dad didn't have to have a conversation with me when I was 16 and got keys to my car. There are layers and layers and layers to this that I think we could go down the row. I think even still today, you and I probably get the same job. It's the data that shows that I'm probably going to get paid more than you. There's data to back it up, but I think it's not like the Constitution says this anymore. Our laws don't necessarily say that, but it just is. It is what it is. And so I think there's data that does prove it, but I think there's just a reality. If you just pay attention a little bit, it should be clear. I want to get the answers, but before we do that, I want to hear your perspective on George Floyd. When you watched that video for the first time, what went through your mind?
So there's this thing that this movement that I really like, where we're seeing Black men actually go to therapy, understand and deal with their mental issues, understand and deal with PTSD of being Black in America, understand the mental trauma of some of the things that we've had to deal with growing up. And by the time I got to the George Floyd video, me and you had a conversation, say 4 years ago. Trayvon Martin's situation was what, 2012? I think I want to say maybe 2012.
Yeah.
So after watching so many videos, I couldn't watch the George Floyd video once I saw the picture of the officer with his knee on his neck. I couldn't immediately go watch the video.
Yeah.
So that in itself, for me, is a traumatic thing. Yeah. I don't want to watch any more Black death.
Yeah.
So it took me a while to even watch the video, and I mean, like, it just quite a few days before I was actually watched the whole entire thing.
Yep.
Now, and that's because initially when the videos would come out, I would watch it because I'm like, I want to see what this injustice look like. I want to see, the person running away and getting shot, because I know once this happens, then this justice system will have seen this video, and so there's no way these cops are going to walk free because there's video now.
Yeah.
And after seeing so many cops walk free, now you get to the George Floyd situation, and you're like, well, what am I going to watch this for? So I could see 4 more cops walk away free, and the dude actually was, pleading for his life, talking about I can't breathe again,
Yeah.
and actually cried out for his mom before he died. No,
Yeah.
that's traumatic to me.
Right.
So that's and from my therapist, let me know like that's a form of PTSD to continue to see that, because there's only so long or so many videos you can watch before you start to identify with that. I mean,
Yeah.
what makes George Floyd any different than, you, Nils, getting a call saying, hey, Jason got pulled over and here's what happened and he's no longer with us. Like that's a possibility in this country.
Yeah.
So I couldn't watch it for a long time. When I finally did watch it and saw it, my immediate response was not any type of anger or frustration or anything along those lines. It was, what type of mental verbal gymnastics are they going to use to get these cops off? What kind of mental or verbal gymnastics are going to be done for people to say what happened before or after the video, or the cops, whatever the cops did was justified? Like, who are the people, the sympathizers, that are going to say what these cops did was right, and using that knee on the neck method was a way to make sure to subdue him until death? And so that and watching everything play out differently, where people actually just got fed up with it, then that gave me more vindication than anything else I've seen in a long time. I knew there was going to be a time with the political division we have, the religious division we have, the systemic divisions we have, just a lot of economics divisions we have, the different economic situations are going on, this pandemic, and everything being so divided that the United States was ripe for some situation happening and things taking a turn for the worse and blowing up. And that event was it. And it was so quick, because right before that you had Aubrey down in Georgia, and that situation, the video of that, and people saying, oh, he was fighting, for his life. Like, I don't know. And the people who were saying, trying to justify it, I'm not sure if you've ever been hunted down and shot at. Most of us have it. But usually they're like, oh, you run or comply. No, why should he have to comply with somebody trying to hunt him down? That to me is something that non-marginalized people tell marginalized people, because they feel like if you're ever questioned, you need to respond. That's a superiority complex. Because we've seen that, like, that's not something you have to do. You don't have to answer questions to certain people. You don't have to do that. And if somebody tries to hunt you down, most of the NRA supporting gun members have been like, well, he had a right to defend himself. He didn't have a gun on him. People who hunted him down did. All right, we'll keep moving on. Then you have Breonna Taylor in Kentucky, who the cops went in and just shot her house up. Her boyfriend shot back, and they charged him with shooting at the cops, but they busted in the house, didn't say anything, and just shot the house up. So you have those 2 incidents, and then you get to George Floyd being the 3rd incident within a short time frame. And Breonna Taylor wasn't filmed. We only found out about that after the whole Aubrey situation, which was filmed. And then we see George Floyd was filmed. It was too much. It was too much. That's traumatic. That's traumatic. And the officers were not even charged in the Breonna Taylor thing. We were not even talking about Aubrey had the 3rd guy not filmed it. Then we wouldn't be talking about it. They would have denied it, and he would have just been jogging in while black and dead. So, and they could have made him out to be a trespasser and pulled out the rest of his history to say why he deserved to get shot, because he did something at 16 stupid like me and you did, which is irrelevant. And then you got the George Floyd situation and so on and so forth. And they're trying to pull up his past to try and, make him look like whatever he did 15 years ago is relevant to being, putting a knee chokehold death. So it's just the gymnastics that happens in America to devalue Black lives is one of the main reasons for the Black Lives Matter movement. And every time these situations happen, it's traumatic to watch another video of Black death, and then the mental gymnastics of the media trying to justify why they deserve to die. That's just it's just too much.
Yes.
It's too much.
It is, and I hope, and I don't want to create PTSD for anyone, but for those that haven't watched it, I think you need to watch it because those 4 men murdered George Floyd, and it was he was accused of a counterfeit $20 bill. I mean that was the, and so the punishment for what wasn't even a for sure, that he did it. It's mind blowing, and I think had it not been for cameras, I think we all know what would have happened. You need to watch it because I think it is probably the most definitive proof I've ever seen on camera. Now, I think, Jason, it shouldn't have been, it was pretty definitive before this. But I do think that when you look at both camera angles, you watch the whole thing, it was a decided murder. I think it's jarring, and I think it needs to be watched for anybody that might even question why this is enraging. And you cannot look at that and just say, well, this is just a bad apple, because there's 4 of these men who did this together. So Jason, I want to get to, and are you okay on time?
Yeah, I'm good. I don't have anything else till 10:30 Central Time, so I'm good.
Good. And I appreciate you taking the time and really digging deep into this. Let's talk about what do we do? What can be done? Where do we go from here? I mean, we want a solution. We want, and there's no doubt there's no easy quick fix to this. There's not going to be a law that fixes this. What do we do?
No. So right now, I think when me and you were texting, I said, listen, learn, and then use your platform, use your voice. So listen, I think if you decide you want to be an ally, and you're seeing some things that you just realize just are not right, listen to your Black brothers and sisters. Listen to us. Listen to the stuff we're saying, because we've had to prove over and over again and come up with ways to show that like these things were happening. These things are not new to us. They're just being filmed now from so many different angles, so many different times. And now white people are saying, oh my goodness, I didn't know there was a problem. And your America, it wasn't a problem. Your life and your view and your perspective, your experiences, it wasn't a problem because it wasn't something you had to deal with. These things have been going on for a very long time. So when we say listen, then also learn. Learn about the injustices that have occurred. If you want to use MLK quotes, then learn more about MLK. Learn that, when you see how offensive it is to see the CIA send out a tweet about MLK Day when the CIA set them up, like that stuff just doesn't make sense to us. But when we see people who will condemn Colin Kaepernick, which finally certain people in the NFL even acknowledge that, hey, we were wrong. Yeah, it's great. He still doesn't have a job, and you just consistently pissed on what he was doing while he was doing it. Now after the fact, you're like, hey, we were wrong. It's the same thing you did to MLK. Like, okay, now we realize we were wrong, but back then they hated him. So learn about the why before getting offended about the reason we're talking about injustice and thinking we're always trying to play the race card. Like, the reason the race card is played so much in America is because America is racist. So if your America isn't racist, that's fine for you, but that doesn't mean America isn't racist for the people who don't look like you. And in order for change to occur, we are going to need white allies. That's just how America works. America needs white allies. We need white allies, and we need corporations to do more than send out social media posts saying, hey, we are with our Black brothers and sisters. That's great. Now, what are you going to do to get behind it? If you're talking about you're going to send money to support civil rights and social justice organizations, that's great. What does your executive board look like? What do your hiring practices look like? How are you going to help, some of these marginalized people, minorities, get jobs within your organizations? And is your executive team and decision maker team continually going to be explicitly and only white?
Yeah,
that's not changed. That's just a social media post and a minor dollar amount on your balance sheet. It doesn't help. It doesn't help. No, we don't continue to. We have to do more than just throw money at the problem.
Yep.
But listen, learn, and then use your platform. So, which is what you're doing right now.
Yep.
When me and you were talking, there are people that will listen to you that will not listen to me, that I will never reach, but they will listen to you. So if you're having a conversation with me, or you're saying some of the things that I'm saying based on what you've listened and learned, then they'll hear it and they'll actually start to think about it. To them, my voice might just be, their biases will say, I'm just talking about things that don't really exist. Okay, I'm playing the race card. I'm talking about racism again. I won't let it go. But if you say it, then it has a different impact, or use your platform to talk about it. And so, and I've seen numerous instances where I go on posts of my white friends and I see them arguing, with their white friends about different things.
Yeah.
That's not something I've seen in the past.
Yeah.
So, and I'm not saying all white people think it's a monolith. They don't.
Yeah.
They don't. And just like all Black people don't think it's a monolith, it's not all things. But I've seen white people defending certain things with their white friends who you used to think in a certain way, and they would just say, oh, that's just my racist cousin thinking the way they think, and you wouldn't say anything.
Yep.
And I think, what was it? I'm trying to think of the quote I had on my page about Martin Luther King saying, he said, whites, it must frankly be said, are not putting in a similar mass effort to re-educate themselves out of their racial ignorance. It's an aspect of their sense of superiority that the white people of America believe that they have so little to learn. So, and we silence is complicitness.
Yeah.
So we don't want you to be silent. We want you to use your voice to speak up. Now, with white friends that have come and spoken to me and said, hey, look, I don't know what to say. As you're learning, there are resources where you can find things that you can say. Google actually had a great resource. One of the resources that I actually put out was under iChurchMethod, iChurchMethod.com/BLM resources. It's a link to a Google Doc with a whole bunch of resources similar to the video that you watched, and they put out a whole bunch of resources, books, podcasts, articles to read, different videos to watch. It's just a whole bunch of resources that you can go look at and read and learn about the injustices and the things that are going on. About COINTELPRO and how that was systemically put together by the FBI and J. Edgar Hoover to dismantle the Black Panthers, because they made the Black Panthers out to be this group of people that were going after trying to shoot cops, when they were essentially protecting Black neighborhoods from racism. So it's just stuff like that that you just didn't know. And they, wiretapped Dr. King and tried to set him up to actually, I'm not going to get into conspiracy theories. The fact is, you need to learn all these things, because the realities that we're taught in history class in our American education school system are framed in a way that make one type of people look like saviors and another type of people look like just different. And that's just not exactly how we want things to go. And so there's a lot of things you have to unlearn and get through the miseducation, and then you can start to speak on certain things. But prior to that, listen to your Black brothers and sisters about things that are going on in injustice. Learn what you can about the history of the injustice that have been occurring in this country and continue to occur. And then use your voice to speak up and help dismantle these things, because it's going to take a monumental effort. It's going to take a generational effort.
Yeah.
The thing I like that I'm seeing is the worldview that my daughters have, who are way more socially aware at 16 and 14 than I ever was. The worldview that your daughters are going to have, and is going to be way more socially aware than me and you ever were at their age.
Yep.
So, and they're, I think, well, I don't know what to say, 5-6 years younger than my daughters. You know, your daughters are much younger. So, but the way they're going to view things and the way they're going to do things is so vastly different that it actually gives me hope.
Yeah.
It actually gives me hope because they see things different and they call it out at a young age.
Yeah.
And we just didn't do those things at that age. We just weren't aware enough to do it. So that actually gives me hope. But right now, for allies that want to help, those are the things they can do. Listen, learn, and then use your platform to speak up. And that's exactly what you're doing here. So that's why I was happy to have this conversation, with a friend, to talk about the things that me and you talk about via text. We just let everybody listen.
And Jason, since we first spoke about this years ago, I have wanted to speak up, and I have dipped my toe in the water of speaking up and got a little bit of backlash that I should have been more comfortable with. And I was scared about losing work. I was scared about, things that I'm embarrassed to admit. We've got to speak up. Jason, one of the things as we speak up I have, and the more educated I get, I think it's helped me to gain boldness in speaking up, because understanding how significant this is. But I think that the other side, though, is I can speak up and help people, and I do. Privately, I've had so many conversations that I have been encouraged by, and even watching, my white friends progress in their understanding. And no doubt, as a country as a whole, we're talking incremental, very small, but progress. But I think there's still this, like, I want a solution, and understanding is the beginning of understanding, but it isn't necessarily a solution. And maybe just understanding will lead to some solutions, and maybe I don't know. I mean, maybe there's some policies, maybe there's some company policies, maybe there's just some natural progress that gets made culturally, but it's still hard to understand what will bring resolution here. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So if you're talking about solutions, like actual tangible solutions that we're going to see, then you would need to actually overhaul systems. You would need to look at the policing system and the policing unions and the hold they have over towns and municipalities and counties and so on, and the power they have, qualified immunity, where they really don't have consequences for the things that they do. You'd have to look at the political system, the divisiveness of the political system, but also the fact that the people who get into power in the political systems and their belief system, their set of beliefs, and how corrupt they get easily, that doesn't focuses away from people the higher they get, and focuses more on corporations. That's how the U.S. is run like that. So if you look for solutions, we need people, allies, as well as Black people, brown people, etc., to get into local politics and work their way up in the political system. You'd have to redo the education system. You'd have to actually start talking about Black history and not start at slavery. That's not where Black history starts. But if you go to the museum in DC, if I'm not mistaken, I believe Black history, when you're at the bottom and it's actually you're walking through the exhibit. If I'm not mistaken, I believe at the bottom. It starts, like a slave experience. And so slavery is where they start with Black history, and that's not where Black history starts. We need Black history starts way before that, but because a lot of us don't know where we actually came from, because our records were erased, our history was erased, and that's part of a problem, then we would need that type of information to know like exactly where our history comes from. What countries in Africa do we come from? Or, what, or even mixing with Native Americans, what tribes, because there are a lot of Black people who have mixed with tribes that are here. What tribes are we mixed with? We just don't know our history. So you got that particular aspect of it that would need to be overhauled. The financial system needs to be overhauled in the way that it's created. So if you're talking about actual solutions, you're talking about boots on the ground, overhauling systems that have been in place for hundreds of years, have quite a bit of power, and would need to be block by block dismantled and rebuilt. Is that possible? Yes. Will it take longer than me and your lifetime? Yes, it absolutely will. But those are the actual solutions that I believe could actually work and occur, and it would have to be a coordinated working together effort, and not this I don't see color type of effort. Like let that I don't see color statement just fall out your vocabulary and just go. We are different colors, tones, creeds, etc. But that doesn't mean we can't come together. That just means we have different amounts of melanin. And so therefore, but that would be the things in terms of solutions. It's a monumental task to take a country that is, I don't know what, 17, so almost 200, 300 years old, and break down these systems that are built to institutionally favor white people and rebuild them to favor all. Yeah, justice for all sounds great, but we know America is not built like that. Yes. It's not. It's a great lie at the moment.
Yeah.
And so that's just what it is.
That's so helpful, Jason, because I think as I think about listening and learning and then using our voice, and I think that's very tangible how you just laid that out, of using our voice of, look, if you're in education needs reform around this. Mm-hmm. Learn, listen, and speak up in your sphere of influence. Government needs, business, church, nonprofits. I mean, it is across the board. We could probably look at, housing. We could look at it, every aspect, and where whatever circles you might be in, there's a need for reform that comes out of first listening, because you can't learn without listening, and then continuing to learn, and then speaking up. And I think, me as a fixer, I want to have just a law. Like, let's just make a law that fixes it. Well, that's not going to. There isn't a law that can fix this. And I think we have made laws that actually should fix it, but we haven't really aligned to them. And it's the structures that kind of even played the law. That documentary 13 is a perfect example of how a law was created that is ambiguous to maintain, those systems.
Exactly.
There's so much to this conversation, Jason. I love you. I'm so grateful for your friendship and your just direct honesty. Is there anything else around this that, especially for the white people that are watching and listening, that you'd want them to know and to hear?
Yeah, I continue to want the white people listening to use your voice to speak out. I mean, I can't basically stress enough to listen, learn, and by learn I mean learning the actual history of things that have actually occurred, and I learn what's going on. But you have to unlearn the things that you were told that you blindly believe because you had no reason not to believe them. Yeah. So confront your biases. Understand. You might have some racist views that you have to confront. Self-awareness is key to just in life as a whole. And people can understand that if it's, some type of motivational topic, or, if one of our favorite motivational speakers says it, then it's self-awareness. Yeah, but understand there's some negative things we have to confront about ourselves when it comes to self-awareness as well. Yeah. So understanding and confronting those things and then starting to learn how to be better, learn how to do better, and learn how to be a better ally in this particular this situation, circumstances that we're going in, because they're unprecedented.
Yeah.
They're unprecedented. But here's the thing we're talking about, and then use your voice. Don't go through all this where you're listening, about what's going on with these injustices, learning, and so on and so forth, and then go back to business as usual when it comes time to vote.
Yeah.
Vote in the interest of that will bring about change. So don't sit here and talk about all of this stuff, and then when the smoke and the fire dies down, then you lose interest in the movement and you go back to business as normal. The change is going this year, especially in a year of that, so many voting will impact so many different aspects of our nation. Vote in the best interest of change, as opposed to and not to get too political, but Black people don't have the option to be one issue voters. We can't just go into the voting booth with one issue and say, I'm only going to vote on this one issue, and forget the 99 other reasons why a particular party is offensive to us.
Yeah.
So, and I'm not saying one party is better than the other for Black people. So that I'm not even getting into that aspect, that conversation. We won't even go political today.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is, vote in the interest of change based on what you're seeing, and not just continuing to vote how you always vote. Because I don't want to have allies who will give me all this lip service and put out these posts and say all these things. And then when it comes time to vote the same way we always voted. And then when the research and the data comes out, we see that a certain group of white people voted the same way they've been voting, or evangelicals voted the same way they've been voting. And here we are with 4 more years of this BS of dealing, with what's been happening, dealing up to this. I'm saying to vote for change. So, and I'm not telling you who to vote for. I'm just saying, if you're tired of how things have been going, then vote for change.
Yeah. And the person that I've been listening to in this realm, Jason, is Charlemagne the God from the Breakfast Club, and the way he's interviewed all the Democratic candidates leading up to now, and he I think he has really dug into, like, what are you as a politician going to do in your if you're become the president. And I think it's I've really respected the way he's approached the conversation, the things I've learned from him in that space. Jason, my wife and I went and joined the protest here in New York a couple of days ago, and one of the things I was so encouraged by is, I would guess, there were probably 2,000 or 3,000 people that were, marching through the streets, and I would, if I were to put a number to it, I would guess it was 25 to 30% Black, and then the others were mixed, and it was really beautiful. I feel like when you look 4 years ago in a lot of the protests, it was maybe 95% Black, and so it really I think has been encouraging, and I hope you're encouraged by that as well. The understanding is increasing. I think we're just, though, as a society, beginning to just start listening. There's still a lot more learning to do, and then I'm encouraged that more people will continue to use their voice. I'm extremely encouraged. One of the, I'll just share one more resource. Dunham and Company, who is a company that I work for, and we just released on a podcast today, one of our clients, Alan Houston, who's a workplace for the New York Knicks, having a very real raw conversation about racism in his reality. And I think that I hope people will, that's another resource that people go listen to. And Trent Dunham, who's my boss and the president, and he sits in a very similar seat to me. He grew up in a white world, and he listened in, and Alan just speaks into him directly as a person, but to all those listeners, similar to this conversation. And so I'm grateful for those that are beginning to listen. And Jason, I'm grateful for you taking the time again to share this. We've talked about doing this for a long time, and I'm glad we're able to do this. And I hope this is the beginning of many more conversations. And thanks, Jason, for taking the time.
Yeah, it It was definitely something we talked about, and I just got a message from Adam. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Adam McLaughlin, who I was going to talk to at 10:30. He said, "Take your time with Nils," so he's actually
Yeah,
watching. So that's great. Thanks, Adam.
great.
So
Thanks, Adam.
the thing that's interesting about me and you, and I want to mention this because when these type of conversations happen, when you first reach out to me, and you know, me and you have been friends for years, and I said, "Hey, I'm not ready to talk about this
Yeah.
yet."
Yeah.
You know, so there are times where I finally got to the point where I was like, okay, I'm ready to talk about it in a very calm, intellectual, logical manner that talks about solutions. We'll talk about the problems, but we'll also talk about solutions. But when things initially happen, I don't want to talk about emotion because talk out of emotion because
Yeah.
I don't want to miss the fact that we have the audience and coming with the message. But as I was mentioning before, it does become a traumatic thing, and so I do take time to process before, or need to take time to process before we have these conversations. Even if I'm having a conversation in a safe space with a friend who's just looking to, hey, let's talk, learn. I have an audience that I can get the information out to. But yeah, this, I want to make sure that people understand, like, this wasn't a conversation where you just hit me up like, hey, let's just talk, because you gave me space to process for me to say, like, for a couple of years, hey, I'm not ready yet. I'm not ready yet. This is a little too much of what's going on. But also, I wanted to see a point where we got to where allies started to step up and use their voice a lot more.
Yeah.
Even and I understand you have a family to take care of, and you are taking a risk by using your platform to speak on things that certain uh, people you work with may not agree with. Similar to when I think it was the gentleman. I'm thinking I can't, and I'm sorry, I'm mad. I can't think of their names, but at the Olympics, when the two gentlemen put up their fists when they won, and then it was another the white guy. I think he might have been in third. He was on the mantle as well. But like and all of them took a risk by doing that to bring attention to the social injustice that was going on, especially with the two black guys that put their fists up. But the white guy had backlash as well, and it's like, but we need allies.
Yes.
We need allies. So, and I understand my friends who are black who are like, hey, I'm not interested in talking about these things. White people, they need to go research and find out for themselves because they've been so miseducated and believing this American dream for so long that now all of a sudden they want to talk. No, I don't want to talk. I totally get that, and that's a valid response.
Yeah.
But there needs to be some people who are open to educating allies in helping them listen and learn and pointing them to resources, and then also saying, okay, if you want to use your platform, here's what you can say based on what you learned, or bring on someone who you can ask questions to, who can speak to these things, so that therefore that can help you going further along in learning how to address certain things and not stepping on landmines and speaking speaking what you might think is your truth, but really making things worse, like Drew Brees did.
Yeah.
So, which is recently, and he had to walk that back. So
Yeah.
got to read the room, bro.
There are there's so much, Jason, and there's so much to learn, and I think we even see in the comments on this video that there's still a lot of ignorance, and we're going to keep having the conversation, and Jason, I promise you, I'm going to use my voice, my platform, my privilege, my influence in every way that I can to bring reconciliation, to bring reform, and and I appreciate your because you've had a lot of patience through the years in the conversations you and I have both been a part of, and I'm grateful for your voice and the education you've brought. So thanks for taking the time. We'll continue the conversation again in the future.
Oh, absolutely. So now definitely we definitely need to have these conversations more often. And so again, I look forward to them. And I know there's a few other friends that we have that wanted to participate as well. So let's keep the party going.
All right. Thanks, Jason.